So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this perhaps is one of the maps that I've done the most since I've been doing 3rd Age Reforged just in general, because it's Thranduil's Halls, and there is good reason for that. It's a very fun map to play on, I know that, in the sense that if you're the defenders you get to dig in nicely, but if you're the attackers you have a bit more in terms of options. It can get quite choke pointy out here on the front line, especially with those two areas, but there's more to being the attackers here than a lot of other very defense-heavy sieges, as it were, for lack of a better term, in the sense that you have to approach it in, or you can approach it in multiple ways. In this occasion, I think based on the amount of frames we have, while it is nearly 30,000 frames, considering it is a 5v3, I imagine we're going to see quite an aggressive and fraught battle. But also, we're going to be carrying on with a theme that was in the most recent free-for-all, in the sense that we have a bit of a Third Age style kinslaying going on here, because it's going to be elves versus elves, and we're going to see Lothlorien on the defence, 3 Lothlorien armies that are going to be defending the Sylvan elf realm, and we're going to be seeing 5 Imladris armies on the attack. So this is probably, well, certainly with 5 attackers who can fill out their armies a little bit more than the 3 defenders, this might be the most we've seen of Imladris on a single battlefield for a long time, perhaps ever in Reforged actually, seeing as you very rarely see 5 Imladris armies on the attack like this. You might see the occasional 1 if the forces of good are attacking. But even so, this battle has got a bit of a High Elf versus Sylvan Elf vibe back from Vanilla, which feels like a very long time ago at this point. But yeah, we'll go through the attacking armies first and foremost. Imladris being on the attack would suit them more so than it would Lothlorien, because their extra armour and their more defensive nature with some of their heavy infantry is going to accent them in this sort of situation a little bit better. But Lothlorien, with their very powerful archers, can cause problems even for the mighty Imladris. We'll just have to wait and see how this goes. And we'll start off with Coffee, who's going to be the player who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. He's going to be playing as the first of the Imladris armies. He's gone for some Imladris Guardians, which, when it comes to heavy infantry among the elves, Imladris are always going to have the edge. They were not able to quite see out their victory in the most recent free-for-all, being defeated by, in the end, the superior melee defense really of Mirkwood. But Imladris were able to take a real beating in that fight, and if they had just pulled their punches a little bit more early on, I feel like, thinking back on that fight, then they could have been able to conserve enough of their strength to be able to see themselves over the line, because it was such a close battle, that one. On this occasion though, going for Imladris Guardians and going for that armour upgrade does 2 things. It means that the Loran Axemen are not going to be the superior line infantry unit here. You know, the Imladris Guardians are going to be better than them across the board. The armour upgrade also means that you're going to be trying to take away as much of the effectiveness of those very dangerous Lothlorien archers as you possibly can. So I agree with this pick, but you don't want to go too quality heavy even if you're Imladris in this situation, because if you do, your army is going to be small enough to the point where Lothlorien skirmishers, both javelins and archers, could see them over the line, and that's going to be the main way in which Lothlorien try to win this fight. Just in behind are the Broinen River Wards. All the elven factions have got a heavy swordsman like this, and in Imladris' case, again, very fittingly, they've got the best armour. They do actually have slightly lower melee defense than the equivalents from a faction like Mirkwood, for example, but the armour overall is going to be more useful on this occasion, even though they are a good target for Lothlorien's archers to go after. The extra armour that the Noldor descendants put on is going to be enough to mitigate a good amount of that damage. Runway Spearman, this is a unit which really a class of unit that the other elven factions don't really have access to, other than, I guess, Linden do in their Noldorin units actually. This, not quite bodyguard tier units, but just below that in terms of what you pay for them and ultimately what you're going to be able to get out of them. The Runway Spearman, really good armour, fantastic shield value, going to be really good at keeping themselves alive in the fight, even against some of Lothlorien, I should say. Seeing as we're in Mirkwood, it's going to get a little bit confusing, I suppose. But yeah, they're going to be able to keep themselves alive even against Lothlorien's more dangerous units of infantry. Excellent unit really for keeping the Imladris fight going, which, if they're going to be as aggressive as I hope they will be, the Runway Spearmen will be a massive part of their main attack. The God Helene, we saw them used to good effect in the most recent free-for-all. On this occasion they do have the armour upgrade as well, which for the same reasons as the Imladris Guardians is going to be very useful. They're also a bodyguard tier unit, so multiple HP as well. Very, very strong individually. The Silverthorn arrows, I don't know how effective the Imladris archers are going to be on this occasion. If Lothlorien play their cards right, then it will be very difficult for Imladris to use their skirmishers, and indeed they need to make it difficult for Imladris to use their archers, because if they don't, if they surrender the ranged advantage as well, it's going to be a pretty bruising encounter for them, I would say. God Halim are here though. Runway archers, so once again that really high-end, not quite bodyguard tier unit that the Runway are. Got a unit of Spears of Rivendell, which are actually armor piercing, but they are, unlike the unshielded Broynin Riverwards we've already seen, this is a unit when they don't have their armor upgrades that are going to struggle if Lothlorien get them in their sights. Got some Norotino warriors here on the front as well. Much more of a basic archer this, but what sets them apart from the standard archers of Rivendell is they are actually pretty good in melee, especially if they get involved with some of the lighter Lothlorien units. They could have something to give, and if it comes down to as narrow a margin as we saw in the free-for-all, having Norotino warriors instead of archers of Rivendell could be the sort of thing which serves Imladris well. Imladris sentries, for once, Imladris is going to be up against a faction which actually has superior pikemen. The Lothlorien pikes are going to be better because they're a bodyguard pike unit, really the only example of such a thing. But the Imladris sentries, I would say, are the third best pike in Reforged as it stands at the moment. Their abilities in melee, I think, do put them ahead of the Narun Aru Sentinels, even though that shield value is nice. But they don't have the armor piercing of the First Legion from Khazad-dûm, and they don't have the second hit point of the Carascaladon's Guardians from their opposite numbers today in Lothlorien. Having said that, if they can keep pikes to the late game, which is going to be easier for the attackers to do with more armies, then the Imladris sentry is going to be nigh on unstoppable if Lothlorien don't have an answer to them late on. Another unit of Runway Spearman, the mighty Gwaithir Myrdain as well. So this is a very high quality army, this from Coffee. It'll be interesting to see if the other Imladris players have also gone with that. They're not armor upgraded here, the Gwaithir Myrdain, and the armor piercing, it will be useful against the higher end Lorien units, but it's not the be all and end all when it's elf versus elf, as it might be against, for example, Angmar or one of the Western Kingdoms of Men, where having that armor piercing can be a real problem for them to deal with in melee. More Imladris Guardians and Runway Swordmasters as well. Probably the best unit of heavy swordsmen in the game outside of the bodyguard tier category. At which point you're looking, of course, at the Pharazim Swordmasters. And finally, putting his general in the Gwaithir Arthand I think is a good choice because they are the tankiest of all Imladris' infantry units. And I would imagine that they're going to be committed later on to try and seal the deal for the High Elves here. Now, moving along to the second Imladris army as we try and look for them in and amongst the trees over here. Here we are. Ord Malleus has also gone for some Imladris Guardians with the armour upgrades. He's got a unit of Runway Swordmasters hidden in the trees as well. Looks to have gone for a slightly more numerous army here because he has gone for some upgraded swords of Rivendell, gone for some more spears of Rivendell as well, so a little bit more in terms of numbers, which I do agree with. At least some of the attackers need to do this so they have the numbers to sustain an assault that could potentially go poorly if Lothlorien start getting their claws into you with their skirmishers. He's also gone for Imladris sentries though, so plenty of quality on display. Unsurprisingly, it's impossible to resist when you're playing as Imladris to go fairly heavily into the quality units. God Halim, the Runway archers, we've got some more Norotino warriors, some more Gwaithir Arthand, and that's pretty much it unless this is his army as well. Nope, this is Pagio, who is the third of the Imladris forces on display today. He too has gone for some upgraded swords of Rivendell. The armour upgrade will help them, but they will still struggle if Lothlorien start using their archers to really good effect. Upgraded Imladris Guardians, got some archers of Rivendell in behind. They too have got the armour upgrade. Like I said, not as good as the Norotino warriors in melee, but they are slightly cheaper, so that may be the thinking here for Pagio, trying to use them as a pure archer rather than thinking about what they will do in melee later on. Hopefully they'll have the battle won by then, the Imladris players are thinking, I'm sure. Runway Spearman, God Halim, Runway Swordmasters and archers, so the full gamut of Runway units as well as the God Halim, and all three foot-based Imladris bodyguard units have been seen in all three of the armies so far. The Gwaithir Myrdain, the Gwaithir Arthand, this one does have the armour upgrades. They've got their sort of NOLDOR-inspired helmets, and also the God Halim over here, of course. Once again, armour upgraded. Then, the fourth army is Grizzly Fox. He has got some Runway Spearmen on the front. For lots of quality again. Swords of Rivendell, this time without the armour upgrades, so they look a little bit more similar to what the Sword Quendi looked like way back in Vanilla, to give it that analogous to way back then as well with the High Elves and Sylvan Elves. They have a cape now though, of course, and yeah, I mean they are going to struggle with the Lorien archers start shooting into them, but in melee they can be surprisingly effective, as all Elven line infantry can. Having said that, when it's elf versus elf, that extra efficiency of your lower tier units becomes a bit less significant because the other faction can just claim that as well. Imladris Guardians, 3 units of them with the armour upgrades. Again, we've got some God Halim without the armour upgrade once again. Archers of Rivendell, Runway Swordmasters, some Broynin Riverwards on either side as well. So less in the way of armour upgrades here, but slightly more in terms of numbers, which again I approve of. Some of the armies have to do that. They can't all just go fully in for the numbers, and this might be the most numerous army yet from Y2K86. He's got some Norotino warriors on the front line, several units of the Swords of Rivendell. It's got some God Heli mounts on the flank as well, so tons of these Silverthorn arrows could be heading Lothlorien's way. Vice versa could also be true, we'll have to wait and see. Gwaith over here, which is, again, the General's Bodyguard unit, a wise choice for me. Runway Spearman, Imladris Guardians, more Runway Spearman, plenty of Imladris Guardians as well, and he has also brought a ballista, which we've seen on Thranduil's Hall several times. The attackers shoot across the river with artillery into the defensive lines, and it devastates them if the defenders are not ready for that. We'll have to wait and see if they suffer from that again. Gwaith from Grizzly Fox as well, before we skip over the river to see what the Sylvan Elves are going to be getting up to on this occasion. And we start off with Beowyn, who is going to be the central of the two armies, although I think we'll be moving on to another army and then coming back to him pretty quickly. He's got 3 units of Lothlorien archers, by the looks of things, out in front, who have deployed some stakes. The thinking behind this, I'm sure, is that if any cavalry is on the field, in and amongst the trees, they may not notice the stakes, but that is a bit of a moot point, because there is no Imladris cavalry on the field today. So this is going to be purely for decorative purposes only. But the Lothlorien archers are not going to be individually as strong as the Runway, but they are actually cheaper. And they fill much the same sort of role, being a heavy archer with no frills on them, essentially. Now, moving on to the first full army, Tintin over here has got some Watchers of the Goldenwood, so Silverthorn arrow is going to be going to Imladris' direction as well, which could be useful for breaking up that advance. We've also got some Kindred of Celeborn. The split shots we saw in the free-for-all, actually, the split shots ended up not being as effective as I'm sure the Lorien player on that occasion would have liked. This might be a little bit different though. If they can position themselves correctly, they could be one of the most dangerous forces on the field today, although Lorien have a unit of Rangers which Imladris do not, so the Cairn Amroth Rangers, if we see them, could prove to be the most significant weapon in Lorien's arsenal here. More Lothlorien archers. Unsurprising to see Lorien go so heavily into their ranged units, because if they're going to win this battle, it's not going to be from brute strength. I mean, they can deploy a good amount of armour piercing, I suppose. The Javelins here and the Woodland Protectors are one such example at range, but the armour piercing alone is not going to be able to make up for the fact that Imladris' quality is just on another level. Maybe that's going a little bit too far, but the point, it stands. If it comes down to just a pure brawl, Imladris will win, especially with the numbers they have. Marchborns of the Wood, Poison Arrows. Elves can rouse, as we saw in that free-for-all. It takes quite a lot of doing, but if Lothlorien can do that, maybe the Poison Arrows can be the thing which tip Imladris over the edge into running away. Lorien Swordmasters, once again, they're more similar to the Broinen River Wards than the Runway Swordmasters in terms of quality. They might even be a little bit better than the Broinen River Wards, because the split between armour and melee defence is probably a little bit better for the Lorien Swordmasters, but of course the Runway Swordmasters are another tier up again. Lorien Spearmen will be very important for holding the line. Very important indeed. The armour piercing of the Lorien Warriors will also be very, very necessary for dealing damage to some of Imladris' scarier units. They won't be able to do the job all on their lonesome, but that armour piercing will be a big cornerstone in what Lothlorien want to try and do. A couple of units of Lorien Axemen, like I said, they're not as good as the Imladris Guardians overall, especially with that armour upgrade, but they are more damaging, and against stuff like the Swords of Rivendell and Spears of Rivendell, they will be very effective, but again, it's all going to be about how they set themselves up here. There are the Cairn Amroth Rangers, and 2 units of the Caras Galadon's Guardians. Significant bursts of quality in and amongst these Lorien rosters. It's all going to be about how Lorien use their tools here. For Imladris, the goal is pretty clear. You move forward and try and brush Lorien aside, but for Lorien, if you can play this smart, you definitely have every chance of withstanding a large-scale Imladris assault. The rest of Beowyn's army includes more Lorien Axemen. He's actually gone for some lower tier units as well, some Spears of the Wood, so I'm imagining he's doubled up on a fair few bodyguard units as a result of that. Caras Galadon's Guardians would be one such unit that I would definitely double dip into on this occasion. Lorien Archers and Lorien Warriors, Lothlorien Swordmasters in behind. There is a catapult, so defensive artillery. If you get that into the right position, it could be devastating. You need to be really careful of Y2K's ballista counter-sniping you there. And there is Watchers of the Goldenwood back here as well. Difficult to see most of this army because there's lots of trees around. Kindred of Celeborn are over here as well, so I would imagine there's Cairn Amroth Rangers in that army as well. And there's a lot more that we're not seeing. And finally, last but not least, we have a blue Trauma Clark. He's got some Watchers of the Goldenwood. You can see Haldir with his red cape, juxtaposed with all of the blue capes of the rest of the Watchers. Cairn Amroth Rangers, unsurprisingly, Woodland Protectors, not surprisingly either. Spears of the Wood are here. We've also got some Galadhrim Blade Masters, which are a lighter but perhaps more mobile, and also the fact they can hide version of the Lorien Swordmasters would be a reason to bring them, but for me, not really worthwhile in a situation like this. The hidden mechanic isn't really going to come into play too much, in my opinion, and you'd be better off going for just the outright heavier and better in this situation Swordmaster unit. Lorinand archers, Lorinand warriors for that extra burst of AP. There are some sword masters on the field as well, to be fair. Plenty of shock infantry in this army, it must be said. Another unit of Karas Galadon's Guardians, so plenty of these high tier pikes, which will be very important for holding the line. We'll see if it's enough for Lothlorien yet, though. Not seeing a lot else. I mean, not a lot of line infantry in here. There are some Lorinand axemen there, but definitely going heavier for the shock infantry here, which is going to help them in melee, but need to be careful of all those Imladris skirmishers, because Imladris haven't cheaped out on their archers either, as Lothlorien may very well have thought. But I'll make a little bit of a cut, because I would imagine that Lorien are going to pull back these Lorinand archers, and then Imladris will start to move forward. They may even wait for a coffee to regroup with them before they move across, but probably not going to be that big of a cut, because it's not an absolutely monstrously long battle. It's long enough. We should still be running it for over an hour, but we shall wait and see. But yeah, I'll make a little bit of a cut and we'll rejoin when the battle is beginning. So the kinslaying is going to begin momentarily, as the March Wardens of the Wood are going to be moving into a position where they can shoot down into the High Elves as they advance through these trees over here, screening their entire advance with a first wave of Runway Spearman. So that's going to be a difficult thing to counterattack into if that is indeed the plan. Tintin over here with several more of his elves ready and waiting. Lorinand archers from Baywin over there, and Blue Trauma Clerk, who is going to, or Clark I should say, is going to be opening up right now. Most of these arrows, unfortunately, however, are being buried right into the terrain just in front of him. It is quite difficult when you're using natural walls such as this to actually get your archers to fire in exactly the manner that you would want. But even so, there's too many of these arrows at this point that are being wasted. You'd be better off in not loose formation, because it's very unlikely, to be honest with you, that Imladris are going to be able to get good shots on you from an angle like that anyway. So what you're gaining from loose formation isn't really all that much in a situation like this. Runway Spearman, though, ready and waiting. Classic archer battle cry of the elves as the poison arrows are being loosed once again. March Wardens of the Wood won't do too well in a skirmish fight, to be fair, if Imladris can get hold of them, which in Tintin's case over here they are a little bit more exposed. Maybe the Imladris arrows could have the desired effect. A lot of range, however, on these even just basic elven archers. Archers of Rivendell taking a few hits there as well. I would assume the spears of Rivendell were the initial target. They're very, very weak to arrow fire, the weakest of Imladris' units to arrow fire, certainly, when they don't have the armour upgrade. Imladris Guardian's going to prove to be a real problem. This is the problem for Lothlorien, though. They are opening up, they're doing a little bit of damage initially here to Imladris, but it's not all that much, and it's also to the units which are least important to Imladris overall. The Godhelm are also over here on this cliffside, shooting into that position of Lorinand Spearman. Lord Malleus's high-tier projectiles being used. I mean, to be fair, the Lorinand Spearmen are one of the tankiest units that Lothlorien have at facing arrow fire from the front. Their armour value is very respectable. They've also got good shields. When they're moving like that, though, and they're getting shot in the back, they're going to get mulched. So Blue Trauma really does need to just lead these units facing the same direction as the Godhelm. Because honestly, if you can absorb all of that ammunition, it's not the end of the world. I mean, ideally you want to just duck them back behind this hill and only commit the spears forward when there is actually an infantry assault going on. But if you're going to insist on tanking that damage, the last thing you want to be doing is showing the enemy your back, because at that point, the shield value is a really significant factor in how effective units are at tanking damage like that. Quite a few dead blades of the wood there, almost certainly coming from archers across the way again. And the first of the melee engagements is getting underway. Very similar kinds of units here in the unupgraded Swords of Rivendell and the Blades of the Wood, but the Swords of Rivendell in a denser formation, whereas the Blades of the Wood in loose formation. There's also plenty more of the Imladris ranks coming forward. The upgraded Swords of Rivendell will also have a certain edge over the Blades of the Wood. So what is Tintin going to do now? He's going to either need to commit forward reinforcements or reorganise a little bit. Wasn't the most well organised of defences, that. Poison arrows being loosed across the river, hitting the Norotino warriors there, but Imladris will be quite happy with that. If Lothlorien are not able to use the full might of their ranged power on Imladris' infantry as it begins its slow push forwards, then that can only be a bad thing in the long run for the Sylvan Elves. The Lorinand Spearmen in a good position. I mean, the Lorinand Spearmen will be a difficult foe to bring down, especially a second unit of them. Swords of Rivendell are capable of chucking out a pretty decent amount of damage for light line infantry such as they are, but ultimately when you're dealing with heavier spears you're going to need something a little extra, and that something a little extra could come from the Godhelm across the way. Once again, something that Thranduil's Halls is very well known for is the fact that the attackers, if they can position themselves well on this side of the river, in the early game they can really punish the defenders for being a little bit too close. And 2 units of God Helem are now firing. There's also the Karen Amroth Rangers, though, who are returning fire, which is quite interesting. Is it worth using a unit of Rangers on a single unit like this, or would you be better off waiting for an infantry blob? I would say the latter. As dangerous as those God Helem are, it is only still a singular unit that you do have tools to deal with elsewhere. Meanwhile, also the beginnings of a melee engagement over here. Those Lothlorien spears not taking tremendous damage from the God Helem, and they should still have the numbers within them and the rigidity to be able to see off a single unit of Swords of Rivendell like this, but they are starting to push on multiple fronts now in Imladris. Not all that surprising. Another unit of Swords of Rivendell thinking about moving through here, but the central lane is the hardest because you have to push further forwards. It's easier to overextend on this map if you put too much into that. Some Imladris Guardians moving forward as well, so Imladris are serious about moving forward here. Their line infantry is going to be a very difficult foe for Lothlorien to dislodge. They're definitely going to need more than just some battered and bruised Lothlorien spears now. And Y2K is also forcing his way through the gaps with another unit of Swords of Rivendell, getting into melee with these lighter Lothlorien archers. So Tintin's defence so far has not gone all that well, it must be said. We saw in the last battle he was also picked on, rather. In the rebuild of Osgiliath where he was on the attack, he was definitely singled out there. And this unit of Karen Amroth Rangers has been soundly dealt with by the God Helem, and this is the other downside to using the Karen Amroth Rangers for going after the God Helem. You're revealing themselves and you're putting themselves in harm's way, and in a straight up skirmish fight, the significantly more heavily armoured God Helem with their multiple HP as well are easily going to be able to win out. And also those Silver Thorns, meaning the Karen Amroth Rangers won't be able to fire their volleys in as organised a fashion as they would like. Lothlorien Swordmasters moving forward. I mean, the Swordmasters here will slice their way through the Swords of Rivendell as this battle goes on. Heavy Elven Swordsmen there. Marchworns of the Wood firing, not at point blank. They're still going after the Imladris archers across the way. Once again, this is the sign of maybe slightly less experienced players in Tintin's case. Baywin using his Karen Amroth Rangers to try and shoot into the Imladris blob, which is definitely a much more well-rounded idea. Elder Runway Spearman coming in there as well, and there is the attacking artillery, so they're making full use there of their ability to shoot across the river. And the Elder Runway Spearmen, they are crushing in from the sides here against Lothlorien, and this has gone the way that Imladris certainly would like, and there is a real opportunity now for Imladris. If they can pour forwards, they can really secure this area and start making the battlefield a little bit wider, which is terrible news for Lothlorien, and I think they realise this because they're going to try and send more reinforcements over here. Woodland Protectors, Javelins, one way in which you can try and even the odds against them, and this I think is the target of that ballista. If they can bring down this catapult, that's another massive tool that Lorien have at their disposal, which could ultimately fall by the wayside. This over here is still just really a bit of a side dish to the main event, just ensuring that Lothlorien know that if this defence starts to falter as well, they will be able to attack through here and start to pour onto what is effectively an open field in front of Thranduil's halls. It's a little bit difficult to gauge how much damage the Lothlorien archers are doing up on the walls. They will be racking up a decent kill count for themselves, but whether it's going to be enough remains to be seen. Nice volleys into the side there from those Woodland Protectors going after the Imladris Guardians, who in turn are being attacked by heavy swordsmen from the front. Forward come the Elder Runway Spearmen, who are almost certainly going to try and go after those Woodland Protectors. Another unit, well, the other unit of Karen Amroth Rangers, maybe going to try and perch itself up on that hill, try and shoot. You can see there's still actually Lothlorien Spearmen over here holding on. It goes to show how resilient heavy Elven Spearmen really are. Their defeat is inevitable, but they're making Imladris' passage up this hill a little bit more difficult than it otherwise would be. Lothlorien Warriors coming in. Maybe these Elder Runway Spearmen overextending themselves a little bit, going after the Woodland Protectors to try and stop them from throwing their javelins in, but as a result they're going to be mobbed now by Lothlorien Warriors and Axemen. So the axes of the Sylvan Elves being used well. Swords of Rivendell looking like they might rout, although they're really trying to push forward to go after the Karen Amroth Rangers, and they have largely succeeded. Again, being aggressive, being assertive in this fight has really served Imladris well, and Lorien so far haven't really had the wherewithal to deal with that. There's a lot of units now on the front line. Galatha and Blade Masters' victory seems certain. These heavy swordsmen will manage to beat out the Imladris Guardians in terms of damage, but when it comes to staying power, you're always going to back Imladris in this kind of fight. There's some Elder Runway still on the front line as well. I'm sure reinforcements are going to be forthcoming. You can see there Imladris Guardians will be able to move forward, and this is a rather large front line. I mean, the saving grace perhaps now is that the archers are almost certainly out of range, and the ballista, if it does shoot, it's kind of likely to get friendly fire. The catapult is in position now. Kind of unfortunate that it didn't get a square hit right into the middle there, because it would have got a lot of kills, not only on the Sword of Rivendell, but on the mighty Elder Runway Spearman. Sword of Rivendell still making up a decent portion of this army, but at this stage it's going to be more of the heavy Noldor warriors. That sounded a little bit more promising. This could result in some routing as well. Certainly the lighter Imladris infantry is much more likely to rout under catapult volleys such as that. Even the Imladris Guardians, if they take consistent volleys, are not going to want to stick around for too much longer. Woodland Protectors, what are they going to be doing? Throwing javelins down into the Norotino warriors. Once again, like, the use of their skirmishers just to go after the Imladris ranged units is not right for me. Your advantage in this battle as Lothlorien is the fact that you can utilise your very dangerous skirmishers against the Imladris infantry. If you're going after the Imladris skirmishers, you're effectively leaving the Imladris infantry unattended, and then you're just trusting that you're going to be able to have the beating of them in melee, which is a dangerous game to play against a faction like Imladris. Defeat is almost a certainty. Forward comes from Swords of Rivendell. Ballista bolts going after the archer positions up here on the hill. Just a couple of units of Lorinard archers, but still, they're going to be wrapping up nice kills themselves. It's a very wide engagement this though, so I'm sure that Lorien, while they may very well be whittling down the Imladris manpower, they themselves are not going to be able to withstand or keep up this kind of warfare for too long. Lorinard warriors, that armour piercing will be helpful against all of these Elder Runway and Imladris Guardians, but they need to have some backup really, otherwise their own lack of melee defence relative to their opponents is going to be a problem. Gwaith the Arthand moving across, the Staff Masters coming in here to plug a gap in the line. They've got huge melee defense values, but they're very lightly armoured, and ultimately the amount of damage they chuck out is kind of limited, so more of a melee tar pit than anything else. That is pretty significant though. Right into the heart of these Imladris units, of no friendly fire actually. Sword of Rivendell, they're going to need plenty more of that. This catapult could yet be the saving grace for Lorien. They crank the artillery back, and they're not able to push their way through this huge, dense front line of Lothlorien quickly enough to get to that catapult. But more units are on the way, including some Elder Runway Swordmasters. That's a good angle as well that they've got, and a lot of that they're going to be hitting is going to be Imladris Guardians. There may have been a little bit of friendly fire in that one, but worthwhile I would say, because if you continue to hit Imladris like that, chances are they will rout. More Gwaith the Arthand, so that's a couple of units of Gwaith the Arthand at this point that are over here. I mean, we've never seen this happen on Thranduil's halls before. It's erupted into a very wide battle which should favour the attackers, but Imladris are taking quite a lot of damage here. Let's go and have a look over on this side. Marchwands of the Wood moving forward. More units being committed in, but in the entirety of the units that are being committed over here are light infantry units, Swords of Rivendell, Norotino warriors that are out of ammunition, and Blades of the Wood just being moved forward to reinforce the depleted Lorinard spears at this point. But like I said, a bit of a side gig this one. If they can break through here, then all the better for Imladris, but all they really need to do is keep this engaged while they continue to focus on the other side. And also, if Lothlorien take enough units off of here as well, they can start to push through the middle. Plenty of Imladris units still across the river, but those reinforcements are a long way away. If they do start to fall apart on this front line, which considering the quality they have is unlikely, but if they do, that could be absolutely disastrous. And I think Lothlorien, if they realise that, they should actually front-load this defence. Carascaladon's Guardians are here. They are going to get engaged in the side, however, up close and personal by Elder Runway Spearman, which is not great for them. Karen Amroth Staff Masters being utterly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of heavy infantry that's coming their way. And Gwaith the Arthand here also. Imladris starting to push up the hills. Watchers of the Golden Wood taking an awful lot of fire from both arrows and ballista bolts. I mean, they're obviously going to kill off the Swords of Rivendell, which they do. Able to reassert themselves on this hill, Lothlorien, but at what cost? As they continue to take Silverthorn arrows in there as well, so the Godhelly focusing them down. And there go the laser-like projectiles of the Watchers. It's a very similar effect to the Godhelline with those Silverthorns, and they are hitting the Elder Runway Swordmasters, so it's been painful for Imladris, but I do think the way the attackers have played this has been very good. In comes another unit of Lothlorien Swordmasters and Warriors to try and block the advance of Imladris, who are now actually seizing the high ground. Fortunately for Lothlorien, it's only with lighter units of infantry for the time being, so they should be able to withstand such things. Are the Carascaladon's Guardians here in the middle of this front line going to be enough? I mean, that's not really the shape of an engagement that you would want to see as a defender. You're going to need to try and reorganise yourselves a little bit. Heat is a distinct possibility. Woodland Protectors being called upon to try and help hold the line. Their defensive attributes of spears is all well and good, but when you consider the units they're facing, it's going to be very hard for them. There's a lot of dead units though, from both sides. Forward come Lothlorien Swordmasters, a lot of Lothlorien Swordmasters and Warriors, so plenty more shock infantry on the way. Kindred of Celeborn also ready to start using those split shots. You can see the split shots also being used to rain some punishment down on the Imladris units that are trying to offer a bit of support. There go the split shots. I mean, it's a little bit of a wild card there. I don't know how useful they're actually going to be, but you can see where the front line is. That part of the front line still remains very much in the same position, but over here it's starting to buckle a little bit in several places. And Imladris pushing up the hill to engage with all of these archers. Bad news bears for Lothlorien still. It's really just a case of whether Imladris overextend or not, because they have been doing the right thing and being aggressive, getting up into the faces of the Lothlorien skirmishers as best they can. But if they do overextend, and they do end up losing steam, that will be bad for them. Starting to put a little bit more pressure on this line as well. Lothlorien Spearman and Galathan Blade Masters having to be committed to stop Imladris' momentum. As Runway Spearmen are here, and not only that, they're actually sneaking around the side here. Ord Malius with his Gwaithie Myrdain. If Lothlorien don't notice that, they could really cause some havoc. As far as a pure melee combatant goes, they are the most damaging on the field today, and they are going to be able to get into those Woodland Protectors, swing those hammers. That was quite the death scream. Yeah, Woodland Protectors naturally not going to have too much of a chance against the finest that Imladris has to offer. Lothlorien Axemen are going to come forward to pick up the mantle in melee. They themselves will also struggle mightily. I mean, the Gwaithie Myrdain could be overwhelmed here though with a lot of Lothlorien units. It's just whether or not Imladris has got other units they can put forward, which they don't, so in the end that unit of bodyguard infantry could end up just being mobbed. There's only light spears at this point covering the middle lane, but for the time being, Imladris still going to be hoping that this will be where they make their breakthrough, hoping that Lothlorien run out of steam first. And there are the split shot arrows firing in there. Swords of Rimdale about to rout. Gwaithie Arthand will be very resilient to arrow fire from the front line. We've seen this overly defensive unit be defeated by heavy swordsmen recently though, in the last Kinslaying inspired video. God Helene pushing up the hill, but at this point they are a little bit overwhelmed and overrun. Lothlorien sending forward everything and front loading their defence. I mean, this is going to be a battle which is decided on the outer walls. We aren't going to see the interior of Thranduil's halls in this one at all, I don't think. If we do, then it will be a unit which has just been held back and ultimately overwhelmed by Imladris. Lothlorien would be better off just committing everything. Watchers of the Golden Wood against Imladris Guardians. This is where one of the Haldeas is. Imladris may need to commit forward their reinforcements a little bit more readily here. We've still got those units all the way across there from Grizzly Fox, but they're too far away to actually be of any use should they be required, as I said. Archers of Rimdale in melee against Woodland Protectors and Lothlorien Swordmasters. I'd be very surprised if they ended up getting a positive result out of a fight like this. The arrows continue to flow. Gwaithie Arthand, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Such a tough and solid unit. And over here, I think we're going to start to see an attack through the middle as well. Runway Swordmasters, who will do very, very well against Spears of the Wood. And they should have the beating of Lothlorien Axemen as well. Altogether, they may need a little bit of support to get through this many of their fellow elves. Elves charging in. They need more than a single unit of Runway Swordmasters. They've got some Runway archers in support, but I mean, this will be an ultimate test really of the Runway Swordmasters. Can they force their way through 2 units of light spears and a unit of heavier line infantry with good attack? And they're just pushing their pikes forward as well, so much more serious now. I think they have managed to regroup with the Gwaithie Myrdain as well, so they weren't able to be overwhelmed and destroyed, but there goes one of the Imladris generals in amongst all of those Carascaladon's pikes on the other side. Meanwhile, over here, having to commit a lot to this front line as well, Lothlorien. All of this committal from Lothlorien just leads me to believe that they're not going to have too much left ultimately. They're having to front load so heavily that surely they're not going to have too much left in the tank later on. But again, it's a matter of necessity with how the battle began. I don't think Lothlorien had too much of a choice. If they tried to retreat early into Thranduil's halls, that transitional phase would have been really painful for them with Imladris having this much left. Yeah, they're getting some support now. Elder Runway Swordmaster is getting some backup from a unit of Imladris Guardians, and that should be enough for Imladris to start gaining the upper hand here in the middle as well. Lorien having to spin many plates, and one of them is going to fall off at some stage. You'd imagine it would be this one over here, but I have to say actually Lorien have held on remarkably well. I think the difference is just going to be that Imladris has got too much quality on this front line for Lorien to deal with in too many different places. I mean, this is, again, 3 units of Gwaith-Yarthan spread out across this front line. That's the sort of thing which is going to be very, very difficult to stop. It's a slow burn of an assault, but burn it will. Elder Runway Swordmasters having to go up against Watchers of the Goldenwood, probably one of the few units on the field that they would actually lose to 1v1, and there's also Kindred of Caliborn in there as well, so the Elder Runway and these Noritino warriors are going to get shown the business end of those Elven Curved Blades that they're facing off against. Well, this Haldir, surely he hasn't got much longer left. Utterly overwhelmed by Imladris Guardians. Getting shanked. Face covered in blood. Yeah, I'm sure we'll see that movie turn up pretty quickly. Kindred of Caliborn firing into the side. There's Noritino warrior. Oh, yeah, there he goes. But yeah, Kindred of Caliborn shooting into these Noritino warriors. They'll probably break pretty quickly under those kinds of attentions. Lorien Archer is actually in a pretty good position here as well. So Lorien continuing to do damage to Imladris. I don't know whether it's going to be enough in the long run, but considering how this fight started for them, didn't start in the best of fashions, they've managed to rally a little bit, do a lot of damage. Another unit of Gwaith-Yarthan over here. All of the Imladris armies dipping heavily into those really high-end infantry and ranged units that Imladris have to offer. The heavy Noldor units, Gwaith-Yarthan. Yeah, this front line is going to really start to struggle. Those Lorien Axemen backed up by only the most basic of Lothlorien spears. And all of that put together is not going to be enough to crack through the heavy armour that Imladris traffic in. Speaking of which, these Imladris pikemen doing a good job there. There's also some routing going on from Lothlorien on the front line. A bad sign indeed. Only 14 of the Gwaith Myrdain left, but they were very much the vanguard in this assault, and they've definitely had the desired effect. As surely on all 3 of the front lines now, Lothlorien are slowly but surely losing them, unless they have a little bit more left, which I'm pretty sure they don't. I think they have committed everything, more or less. There's a couple of units back here. Some Lorien Archers, some Caras Galadon's Guardians, some Kindred of Caliborn, and Watchers of the Goldenwood. I mean, this is a fairly decent little chunk of units, including Woodland Protectors, Marchwands of the Wood. I mean, they should be committed. If they're not going to commit units in, they may as well retreat them, to be honest. I don't really know what Blue Trauma Clerk is doing, and indeed I think he is. He's going to retreat back to Thranduil's Hall, so I take it back. We are going to see Thranduil's Hall's interior. The entirety of the map will be shown, but I think in retreating it's waving the white flag on these front lines, which will give all the confidence in the world to Imladris that they are going to go on to be victorious in this fight. And over here, yeah, they're pushing through now. You can see that this front line starting to fall apart. Imladris victorious. Not a huge amount of units left to them though. Quite a lot of what they've got left is high quality stuff, sure, but their army's looking much more battered and bruised than they were previously. There's a couple of units up here which are still going to take a little bit of effort to dislodge. Watchers of the Goldenwood and Kindred of Caliborn facing off against this one unit of Elder Runway Archers. In the background over there, routing Kindred of Caliborn. Surprising sight, not the sort of thing you see. Caked in blood though. Lorien Archers getting some good volleys off, but ultimately now they will be on the receiving end of some Imladris style revenge. Getting into melee, they're going to fight hard actually. Victory seems certain. Surely the Gwaith-Yarthan will turn that around eventually as Imladris start to set themselves up to move forward. I mean, they should deal with that those 2 bodyguard tier units that are up on that hill before they think about moving into attack Thranduil's halls. I don't know if they've got they haven't really saved enough for me. I mean, they've got a unit of Carasgalladon's Guardians, but if they were going to retreat, they probably should have done so in more of a complete fashion earlier. Some Lorinard Axemen over here. Anything that can be saved at this point needs to be saved. Otherwise, they really won't stand a chance. We will be heading into the final 10,000 frames of this battle shortly. As these Lorinard archers at this point are clearly going to be on the receiving end of a defeat. And I believe over here as well. Well, there is still a few Lothlorien units holding on, forming up a front line of sorts, but yeah, Imladris with a victory on each one of the 3 defensive points, and surely going into the late game they have to be the significant favourites considering what they have left compared to what Lothlorien have left. Moving forward with the rest of his army, well, their armies now across Coffee, and Grizzly Fox had a few units. They managed to hold some stuff in reserve without necessarily needing it. Still, these Lorinard archers hold on. That has been a bit of a takeaway from this fight. Lothlorien, despite being put under the cosh really on every front line, they didn't really roll over to a very scary Imladris army. They were able to hold on for a decent amount of time. Ultimately, though, they weren't organised enough. They didn't choose the right ranged targets in the early stages for me. And they may end up paying the ultimate price for that. Runway Spearman moving forward, but again, more of a defensive unit, so the extra damage from those Kindred, and especially from those Watchers, could be enough to finish off a few more of the Noldor before they are given the opportunity to attack Thranduil's halls proper. Damage there. Any reinforcements on the way for these guys? I guess they will move forward as soon as those Lorinard archers gone. Runway archers, they still have ammunition? Is it the plan to shoot into the backs of the Lothlorien units? Possibly. They've still got their bows drawn. Or out, I should say. Now they're going to be drawing their bows. Although it'll be for nothing really. Well, yeah, so the God Hellions still have a bit of ammunition. So that was a bold move to go into melee with those Lorinard archers when you still have ammunition. But yeah, now they're going to shoot into the backs, and this, all of a sudden, what was actually proving to be a fairly decent engagement for Lothlorien is going to turn around very, very quickly. But Imladris have got the ability to do this, considering the map control that they now have. You can't really wear a bow like that. Sort of put it over your shoulders and such like that, because you'll ruin the string completely. But I suppose it's an elven string, so it's better in every way, and you can do that, I guess, would be the logic. Meanwhile, over here, Imladris setting themselves up on the bridge. There's some spears of the wood which get caught. There always seems to be units that get caught on the bridge over to Thranduil's halls. Interestingly, some woodland protectors coming out, hoping that they can maybe get a couple of javelin volleys into the Runway swordmasters and Blythe the Arthand, perhaps? Is that the idea? Yes, it is, and they are going after the Blythe the Arthand. They stand firm, though. No swordmasters now surely are going to move across. One of them died, a few of them got bloodied, but ultimately not an awful lot of effectiveness to be had there. Woodland protectors will come out, a game of cat and mouse ensues. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, those units were finished off very quickly with the assistance of those ranged units. The God Hellion proving that Imladris do have a truly scary skirmish unit. And again, Imladris' archer lineup is still very good. It's just compared to the other 3 Elven factions, it's not their main focus. Their main focus, more stuff like this. Exceptional units of infantry and cavalry. Getting their business done up close and personal like. 2 units of Carasgalladon's Guardians. That is a significant front line. The only problem with, even with the Carasgalladon's Guardians with their good stats and their multiple HP, the problem Pikes will always have is if their formation gets buckled by sheer numbers, you're going to be in for a bad time. V-shaped formation, Woodland Protectors ready. There's another unit of Carasgalladon's Guardians actually. 3 units of these high tier pikes. I don't think they have much support around those high tier pikes, mind you. Kindred of Caliborn, they're going to try and get their archers in position. Do they have Karen Amroth Rangers by any chance? Watchers of the Golden. I mean, they have got a decent amount of units left, to be fair. I just don't think it's enough. With Karen Amroth Rangers, it may have been, but I can't see any of them unless they're hidden. Entirely possible. Going to start to move across. Gwythian Myrdain in the vanguard. The onus is on Imladris to be aggressive here, of course. They have been so far, so there's no reason to suspect that will change. And there's nothing left. I mean, there's an absolute scene of destruction over here. The likes of which we don't usually get to see on Thranduil's Halls, actually. As part of the landscape, it's usually the defenders will steadfastly hold on to the choke points for as long as they possibly can. But on this occasion, they didn't capitulate and retreat early, which I do appreciate, because it's meant that this battle's been much more interesting than it otherwise would have been. And they're going to move forward here in a big way, which Imladris need to do. The only way for them to be successful here is going to be to attack. I mean, if they were going to redesign this map, the only thing that I would really do would just be to remove this gate, make it just an actual opening, because you don't need to. It is purely for cosmetic purposes only anyway. Gwythian Arthand are moving in. I mean, they're not going to be able to push through lines all on their lonesome like this. Spears of the Wood helping to back up the Karas Galadon's Guardians. They're going to need some support here. Gwythian Arthand moving in all on their own isn't going to help, and if they do that, Loren-armed Axemen could feel the need to wrap up the line, but Peugeot is going to send forward his Elder Runway Sword Masters as well, so it begins. Basically, it's a case of, are the Lothlorien pikes ridiculously strong enough to withstand the power that Imladris still have left to them? 7 Archers of Rivendell, being a little bit stingy here in Imladris, not wanting to move forward in a big way just yet. That moment will come. Please ignore the fact that the rain is managing to pass through the ceiling and into Thranduil's Halls. A little bit more like it now. Ord Malleus committing forward. Some of his Imladris Guardians. More Elder Runway Archers moving forward. That's actually his general, Baywin. The one unit of his Watchers of the Golden Wood which remains, and it is his general. We've seen that a little bit more often lately, which is just down to pure chance that the general maybe has, just on his own, a significant part to play as a combatant. Runway Archers, Naruto Warriors. Javelins now being utilised. Not too surprising. If you do have that angle, you should make good use of it. That armour piercing is one way that you can deal with those pesky Elder Runway from a Lothlorien perspective. A couple of units of them. Yeah, they do have Karen Amroth Rangers actually, so this could get a little bit messy for Imladris. We've seen this situation on Thranduil's Halls once before, and ultimately the Rangers were enough. Elven Rangers, of course, have got that extra point of damage as well, which makes them even more effective than they otherwise would be. From an Imladris perspective, though, at this point, seeing that, you have to just go all in. You have to try and smash this front line to splinters as quickly as you possibly can, because by filtering units in, you're giving time for those Karen Amroth Rangers, potentially as well the Woodland Protectors when they start opening up, to do the damage that would be necessary for Lothlorien to start turning this battle around. I don't want to zoom in too much, because when a blob like that is being hit by Rangers, it can be a little bit risky. Lorien Archers also shooting from on high. Gwythian Arthand moving in, the other unit of Spears, one of the Gwythian Myrdain actually managing to filter his way through the formation. They've got another unit of pikes that they can use, which at this point I would just commit to the front line, to be honest. Just commit as much as you can, try and prevent Imladris from forcing their way through, which is what they're doing. They're doing the clever thing here. They're taking a lot of damage. It could result in a chain rout, but if Imladris can break through this front line, bust through it, cause a bit of chaos, that really will be the end of any chance Lothlorien had at turning this one around. You can see the strength that Imladris still had after those first engagements. Woodland Protectors as we go into the ceiling. Throwing some javelins in. Still Kindred of Caliborn to be dealt with. Neutron Cloak needs to get in there with his pikes, because there's so many Elder Runway. It's very rare that you'll see the elves try and push through with mass and numbers. Especially not Imladris. I mean, to be fair, actually, Imladris would probably be the most likely to do that, given their heavier armour, their more defensive nature. More likely to be able to march through a situation like this without taking terminal losses. But it's still rare to see it nonetheless, and they have been successful ultimately. Lothlorien with not enough infantry. Elder Runway Swordmasters are going to be running in here, chasing down the Lorien archers, and the double whammy that this has is they're going to start to engage units which Lothlorien needed to not be in melee. But also it means that the Rangers no longer have a single blob to try and deal with. If they had managed to keep... There goes Haldir. Baywin's army dealt with. If they had managed to keep Imladris bottled up like that, those Rangers could very well have won Lothlorien the battle. Like, Rangers can be so effective in that way. Combined with the damage that Javelins could have done, it would have meant they would no longer have been able to push through the Lothlorien pikemen, and then Lorien could have whittled Imladris down and won the long game. But ultimately, Imladris recognised the situation, they pushed through the lines, and now Lothlorien don't stand a chance. Any hope they may have had evaporated in that moment, and now it's just a case of what sort of last stand can Lothlorien put on. Gwaithdy Myrdain over here, Gwaithdy Arthan, 42 of them. It is also worth saying as well that Imladris better positioned than most factions that dealing with that kind of punishment with all of these heavily armed and shielded units. Rangers can still savage you, but maybe not quite to the same extent as their High Elven brethren in Linden would have been punished. Gwaithdy Arthan continuing to push forward as the Woodland Protectors try and kite backwards, use their javelins as best as they possibly can. Caliborn being used. God Helem as well, they're shooting across into the Lorien archers across the way. Really, I think they've actually been as a single unit stand. If a single unit has stood out in this battle, it's been the God Helem from Imladris. They've been used to really good effect. They've made life much more difficult for Lothlorien than it otherwise would have been. This unit of Kindred of Caliborn doesn't have the armour upgrade actually. More of the heavy Noldor, pushing forwards to engage them in melee. Gwaithdy Arthan on the way.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Karas Galadon's Guardians, that multiple HP nature of theirs, meaning that they are in much a very similar way as how all of Lothlorien's defences have been in this battle. They are going to hold on, they are going to fight to the bitter end and give a good accounting of themselves, but ultimately victory, when Imladris made their decisive decisions, victory was never going to be in doubt for the High Elves. Gwaithdy Arthan pushing forward in the vanguard, the Karen Amaryllis Rangers at this point out of ammunition. Swords raised. Very good ranger in melee as well because of that two-handed sword. Possibly the best unit of rangers in the game from a purely damage dealing perspective. I'm still very partial to the Ardenheim shadow bows though because of their ability to actually tank ranged fire as well with their decent armour. Voinin River Wards moving forward. We haven't really seen much of the Voinin River Wards yet, but they're moving in now. They're going to be a part of Imladris' ultimate victory. More Gwaithdy Myrdain. Having a look at the differences. Yeah, it's been ultimately, there has been an air of inevitability. Probably the most dominant Imladris performance we've seen in quite some time. And that was just because they were well organised. Lothlorien feels like they've always been trying to play catch-up. They've been metaphorically stumbling ever since Imladris pushed them back off that initial choke point and the battlefield became a little bit chaotic, a little bit wider over that hill, over that hillside. And that has ultimately made a big difference. Silverthorns being used still. Watchers of the Golden Wood, anchored by Woodland Protectors. Still these Lorien archers over here. Still firing into Imladris as they move forward. One of the Lothlorien armies, well, I suppose Baywin's has already gone. I guess Blue Trauma Clark is the only one that remains. Tintin's army now gone. Only one Lothlorien army remains. Gwaithdy Arthan have also been a bit of a hero. The Imladris Guardians, just in general, the Imladris roster has been shown off really well in this fight. This is them, when they're on the attack, this is pretty much them at their finest. Moving forward with force and quality, and even when they're up against a foe that has quality of their own, it can be difficult to reconcile that when you're facing off against such a force. I would say that Lothlorien should have used their skirmishers better. That was always going to be what if they were going to win the battle, it was always going to come down to their skirmishers, and they were too busy messing around, wasting it on stuff like Norotino warriors, using javelins on Norotino warriors. That sort of thing is going to go very, very poorly. The catapult had a few moments where you thought, well, and the rangers, maybe they can do some hefty damage here, but in the end this was only flashes in the pan. Imladris were far more consistent throughout this battle. We are now entering the home straight. Going to be more or less a 20% differential here. There's actually not that many units left on the field though, it's just Imladris' armies on the attack are obviously not going to be quite the same as the Orcs. It's still a decent force, don't get me wrong. Enough, when you consider it's a 20% differential, that means that it would have been effectively a dead even fight, 100% to 100%, if Imladris had one less army in its entirety. If it was a 4v3, it would have been one of the closest battles we've ever seen. But it wasn't, it was a 5v3. And Imladris, very, very good value for their victory. Defeat seems certain. Might actually see an admit defeat from Blue Trauma Clark here. Yeah, Elder Renway archers going up against the Loren-armed archers. The Elder Renway just a tier above all the Loren-armed units in general, which certainly can have helped Lorien. Gwaith the Arthan charging into the backs of the Woodland Protectors. No, we are going to see his army rout. He's not going to admit defeat. He's going to fight to the bitter end. He gets points from me for that. Still the rain falls through the solid rock. Into Thranduil's halls. We saw actually the defenders last time, it was more of a themed battle between Mirkwood and the Misty Mountains, but Mirkwood actually held on to Thranduil's throne in that one. On this occasion though, the attackers are the ones that are victorious. Only a military genius could win this battle. There they go. There we are. He does admit defeat in the end, but I think it may just be because he had a couple of units left anyway, not really too much of a factor, and the attackers have won. Not the closest battle by any means, but a really good demonstration of what Imladris are really capable of when they get the wind in their sails. Coffee actually only getting 273 kills. It's a sign really that he held most of his army back, so what we can glean from that is, when I said it was like if it was a 4v3 it'd be super close, if you took his army was the one that was mostly hanging back then, which is, I mean, fair enough, but to be fair, he's the one who sent me the battle replay, I wouldn't have actually had that much fun if I was playing from his perspective. In this one, if I was just hanging around and by the time I entered the fray the battle was already pretty much decided. But still, Imladris played very well. Y2K obviously doing very well with his ballista. All of them did very well actually with their ranged units as well. The God Halim, as I already said, drawing Lothlorien into facing off against the archers in an archer versus archer contest is exactly what Imladris would have wanted, because as a result we got to see how dominant the Imladris infantry was against their fellow elves on this occasion. Let's see what did the damage for the Imladris armies then. Obviously this one not all that much because he didn't actually get involved as much as maybe he would have liked, but it was the God Halim who got 81 kills. For Ord Malleus, a few units breaking 100, including Elder Renway Swordmasters, Gwaithir Myrdain and Elder Renway Archers, so used very nicely there. Obviously the kill count's not going to be too spectacular because when it's elves versus elves there are just less unit models on the field, as it were. Not less units, just smaller units. Once again, Elder Renway Swordmasters showing their brilliance really. Lorien do have decent armour, but it's not up to the same level as certain other factions, and they're not as dependent on it either. So the lack of armour piercing on the Elder Renway Swordmasters is less of a problem for their tier anyway. 137 kills for them. 174 on those God Halim, that's very good from Grizzly Fox's army. Gwaith the Arthand also doing very nicely. Imladris Guardians being the heart and soul of those Imladris pushes alongside the Elder Renway Spearman. And then we have Y2K, who again his God Halim did very well. Again his Elder Renway Swordmasters and Imladris Guardians. Swords of Rivendell not doing too badly in that initial push with 101 either, which is the last thing as you want as Lothlorien if a unit like that is able to get that many kills on your armies. But yeah, God Halim, Imladris Guardians, Elder Renway Swordmasters, perhaps all that you would expect, being the core of this very impressive Imladris victory. So yeah, big thank you to Coffee for sending this battle replay in, and a big thank you to all of the players for being a part of it as well. As for what's coming up next, by the time this replay comes out I will almost certainly be away because it will be into October. In fact, I'll probably be closer to coming back home than I will be to going away. by the time this one comes out. So I'm sort of getting to the end of the amount of replays I have to record in a big batch, I should say. But yeah, I think but when I come back, I think I will be doing, this will be mid to late October-ish. I'll be looking to do a live stream, in a channel update live stream, not like a live stream where I do actual content. I do want to get back into doing that sort of thing, but that's the sort of thing which will be sort of a longer term plan, which I will actually be talking about in that channel update video as well. It is going to be more of a back and forth one than the last one. The last one was just sort of a matter of fact announcement, which actually hasn't really borne out as I would have expected, and that's in a good way, because I haven't had to reduce the content as I feared that I might. But yeah, I think that the next channel update I do, I'll be able to nail down a little bit more what my longer term plans are going to be regarding the channel by then. And yeah, that's effectively, it's just a matter of when I'm going to be able to phase in certain things, and I think I should be able to do at least the beginnings of that come November, December time. And then moving into 2022 is a whole different topic, which again I'll be covering in that channel update as well, because again there's probably going to be more big overhauls in 2022, much as like this year. It's not going to be quite as simple as when I was at university, where I have a lot, it's more concrete over a longer period of time what I'm going to be doing, so I can effectively, I don't have to plan in blocks as I'm having to do at the moment. That sort of thinking might come back into play in 2022 though, but probably not until the latter half of it, so effectively a year away from now. But again, I'm starting to waffle a little bit. It's the sort of thing which I can talk about more readily in my channel update. As for actual content that's coming out, like I said, we've got a battle on Grimslade, we've got a battle on Gath, so plenty of fan favourite maps in many ways are making a bit of a return here. And yeah, there's a few others as well, which I can have a look through and decide which to do, but certainly Gath and Grimslade will be making an appearance soon on the channel as well. So yeah, big thank you to Coffee and all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.